Hey guys, welcome back to the Light Breaks 4th channel. This week's video is going to be a little bit different. I sort of just wanted to sit down with you guys and have a little bit more of a conversational style video. I sort of wanted to talk about a few thoughts I've been having recently, and specifically a question. Why do you do what you do? This is a really interesting question, considering that most of you, when you hear this question, will probably actually start to wonder. And it's sort of interesting that we don't already think about that a lot. Maybe you have before, but it's definitely not something that's constantly on your mind. And I think that there's a few, answers to this question. There's a lot of psychological implications that we can delve into, and there's one that I sort of want to focus on more than the rest, and that is the power of intentions. I think our intentions can often be really telling of who we truly are deep down inside, and we don't often realize, or we purposely don't think about the intentions behind what we're doing. So let's take reading books for an example. Deep down when I read a book, I'm reading it to gain knowledge, but is the purpose of gaining that knowledge to be able to have control over myself better, or to be able to exert control over others? Am I trying to gain knowledge in order to win an argument or always be right or have the last say, or am I trying to gain knowledge to better myself every single day? And that's sort of interesting, and this idea of intention spreads to a lot more things than just that. Continuing with the reading example, when I read, am I just reading to say that I finished the book or that I got it done, or am I reading to actually gain a new understanding of a topic or of someone's experience? Am I reading because someone is telling me to, or am I reading because I want to? There's all sorts of intentions that are behind everything we do, and often those intentions can stray between being good or bad or somewhere in between. In the Japanese novelist Osamu Dazai's short story called Romanesque, he has a really interesting character that I think represents this idea really well. This character, after being publicly humiliated one day, decides, I am going to learn how to fight, and I'm going to become the best fighter in the world, so that no matter what, he says, if a man offends you, strike him down. That's the way it should be. And so he goes and he becomes the best fighter in the world. And his purpose for this is so that he can fight anyone who he doesn't like. And so it's interesting, for years he punches anything he can. He punches mailboxes, he punches walls, he punches furniture. Eventually he goes out into the forest and starts punching a tree repeatedly until the tree has a massive dent of his fists in it after years of punching it. And he becomes the best fighter in the world. Now, he's always waiting for an opportunity to fight someone, because his purpose in becoming the best fighter in the world was so that he could win any argument with physicality, so that he could beat anyone who disagreed with him or who he didn't like. And eventually he gets married. Every single day he's looking for an opportunity to fight, but no opportunity ever comes, because generally that's just not how life works. And one day he's sitting with his wife and bragging, and he says, I'm the best fighter in the world. And she doesn't really believe him. So he jokingly shows her how good his form is, and while showing her how good his form is, he lightly taps her with a punch, and she dies on impact. So this guy who has been working so hard to become the best fighter in the world literally does, and the consequences are fatal. He accidentally kills his wife. And the interesting thing about this story is that it shows us the power of intentions. His intentions were negative, and therefore he had a negative outcome. And so when we think about this with ourselves, what things in our lives are we doing that maybe we think are good intention, but actually have something more malignant underneath them? This ties really well into the Jungian idea of the unconscious psyche. So Carl Jung describes the unconscious psyche as the only medium through which we can truly understand the individual existence. So what this means is that the conscious psyche takes into account the physical things all around us. It takes into account the things we feel, the things we see, the things we taste and touch, etc., etc. The unconscious psyche, however, deals with this more supernatural side of existence. It deals with morality, ethics, it deals with God and communicating with the divine. It deals with the things that we can't see but are still true and there regardless. So because the unconscious psyche brings up morality, we get the interesting assertion from Jung that we need the unconscious psyche in order to understand the duality of mankind. We need the unconscious psyche in order to understand that we both have the capacity for good and the capacity for evil. And that it's extremely easy to have the wrong intentions for maybe the right thing. To take this to a further extreme, the classic example is Adolf Hitler. So Hitler had a lot of good intentions. Him and his countrymen had been severely hurt through World War I, and in the period of suffering afterwards, they found an ideal that seemed as though it could help them, and that ideal just so happened to put a lot of people through a lot of suffering. And so you can see there that maybe he had the right intentions, but he was doing it for the wrong thing. And so it's really important to notice and realize that because of the unconscious psyche and the duality of man, this could be us. We even have the capacity to become someone like Hitler. And I know that that's a very cliche example to give, but it's true. We all have the capacity for that much good and that much evil inside of us. So how do we maintain good intentions through all of the humanity that we have to deal with? I think that one of the most important things is having a why for your hows. So here's a few questions you can ask yourself to keep yourself on track of good intentions. What do you want? Why do you want it? And how will you get it? If we ask ourselves these questions for the things that we desire, for the things we want to do in life, whether that's gaining knowledge through reading, whether that's taking part in a craft, whether that's starting a new job, whether that's going to school, what do you want? Well, if you just want a diploma, a piece of paper, then that might be okay for your situation, but if that's not what you want, figure out what you do want and follow that. Why do you want it? Well, if you're only getting a diploma or going to school so that you can get a certain job in the future that requires a specialized degree, well, that's great if that's what you want, but if that's not what you want and you're going to school anyway, you have to find a why for the reason that you're doing it. If you don't have a why, often your intentions become malignant and can lead to pain in the future and frustration, feeling lost, etc. The third question, how will you get it? I think oftentimes we go into things, we undertake challenges in our lives that we don't quite know how to achieve. The process of learning, growing, and becoming who we want to become. So that's why it's really, really important to have a roadmap for whatever goal we want to achieve. If we just write down or think about, like most of us do, our goals, we often won't achieve them. We need to have an outline. It's the same thing as writing an essay. Often if you try and write a complex essay just by writing first word to last word, it's going to be really, really hard. But if you create an outline, something to follow, steps, name each paragraph and what you want to talk about in that paragraph, suddenly writing an essay becomes much easier, and it's the same with all of the goals in our life. It's the same with maintaining good intentions. We often lose sight of intention if we don't have a roadmap, if we don't have a why, and if we don't know exactly what we want. See, the conscious psyche is often fueled by what seems logically expedient, which isn't necessarily bad. If you want food and it's sitting on the table next to you, then standing up and grabbing the food at the table is the most logically expedient option. However, the world isn't so black and white, so following the conscious psyche can often get us into trouble, especially when it comes to the subjective means of humanity, of who we are, of what we want, and of purpose in life. Humanity is a little less black and white than going and getting a piece of food off of the table next to you. The unconscious psyche is fueled by morality or the lack of it, and thereby helps us to maintain control of our intentions. So while maintaining control of our intentions, it is then important to be able to determine and derive the most logically expedient method for getting where we want to go. And so finding the balance between these two is something that I don't think that we have a lot of, especially with the very high rise in scientific rationalism in our world, where we must have proof for everything and an explanation for everything, which is not necessarily bad in all cases. But as with the unconscious psyche, we can't really describe everything. We don't really completely understand morality and why we feel bad when we do something bad. We don't completely understand why so many people have a belief in God when no one has ever seen him. And so this is what the unconscious psyche helps us to make sense of. It helps us to make sense of existence, because existence is more than just what is physical. We have something inside of us that keeps us on the right path or leads us very far off of it, depending on our choices. So even Carl Jung admits that he doesn't quite understand how to find the balance between the conscious and unconscious psyche, but that it is a process that we can begin to understand as we become aware of the unconscious psyche, rather than just being aware of what we see, what we touch, what we feel, what we taste. And this can help us to have control over the power of intention, because when we're very intentional with what we do, we achieve what we want. So I'm going to start doing this a lot more too, and I hope that we all can be able to gain a little bit more control and understanding of our inherent underlying unconscious intentions. And in so doing, we can learn how to achieve what we want in a good way, rather than becoming misled by the conscious psyche and the whims of physicality. So I would seriously recommend going and reading Carl G. Jung's book, The Undiscovered Self. It has a lot of great information on the topic that we've covered today. It talks very deeply about the unconscious self, the conscious self, how to find our individuality in this world that is so focused on society and the mass thought and the power of the state rather than the power of the human to change and shape his own destiny. I would also absolutely recommend going and reading Romanesque by Osamu Dazai. It's a really sort of funny and interesting short story that sort of gives an interesting insight about this idea of intention and why do people do what they do and what are the consequences of doing things for the wrong reason. I thought it was great, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it as well. So thank you so much for tuning into this week's video on the Lightbreaks 4th channel. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, start a discussion in the comments, tell me what you think, add your own thoughts and ideas, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this, talking about books, about writing, about virtues and morality, and learning to become a better person and live a better life. I'll see you in next week's video.